Let's get somebody to explain all this for us. There's Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia. He sits on the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, and he joins me now. Senator, great to see you. So where do we stand now? Because there's been some juggling and moving parts, even just in the last hour.
Well, Gretchen, on the IMF reforms, I'm not sure they're going to get included in the bill, although I would point out that these are reforms that are supported, I believe, by Bob Corker and John McCain and Lindsey Graham, as well as some of the Democrats. So there was pretty broad bipartisan support. What we shouldn't do is preclude this aid package from going forward. So if it's decided to be dropped and dealt with another day, so be it. In the meantime, we've got to recognize that we've got a new pro-Western regime in Ukraine. We ought to do all we can to help it stand up against the aggression coming out of Russia. I've added 2 points that I hope, both of them bipartisan, that I hope get included. One is if we're going to be able to weaken Putin's aggression, we've got to be able to decouple Europe's dependence upon Russian gas and oil. So along with John Hoeven, Republican senator from North Dakota, I've said, hey, administration, let's speed up the processing of more of these natural gas exporting permits. The administration has granted 6. There's another 20 pending. They ought to get off the dime and over the next 60 days grant them or tell us why not.
What's the second point, Senator, that you want to make sure is included?
And the second point is, Ukraine, we're going to give them aid. One of the things I think we ought to recognize is the previous government in Ukraine turned a blind eye to cyber criminals. I think a lot of us remember the security breach that we had around the Target credit cards. All that came out of Ukraine. If we're going to be willing to assist Ukraine, they got to work with us on law enforcement to crack down on these cyber criminals, because that's where a lot of this problem is originating.
Well, it's good to see that there's bipartisan support on at least an aid bill moving forward thus far. I want to turn your attention to Obamacare, because we're coming up now on the due date when people are supposed to be enrolled.
Less on Ukraine, more on Obamacare.
Yeah. Both things really important. The domestic issue, many Americans care about this, and I know especially you being up for re-election as somebody who voted for it. I know you've been very vocal in going to the meetings last fall to meet with the president and talking specifically about potential fixes. Do you think now, Senator, that the president has done enough changes on his own to move this bill forward without continued problems, or would you like to see more changes?
Well, I've got some more changes. I do think it's kind of ironic that when the president makes changes where there were problems in the bill, he's criticized for trying to fix a bill that, let's face it, was imperfect from day one. But let me go ahead and give some specific suggestions. One, I think we ought to have more choice in the plan. So, for example, there's 3 levels, the bronze, gold, silver, and platinum levels. I think we ought to have a cheaper option. We're going to call it the copper plan, lower premiums, higher deductibles. That ought to be more choice. Secondly, I think we ought to go ahead and move the mandate from small businesses at only 50 employees up to 100. That would mean about 98% of the business.
These sound like significant changes, though, but I just want to. I want you to finish.
Let me finish.
I want you to finish.
Let me finish. You asked me a question.
I want to finish by asking, will you propose this as legislation? Will you propose this as legislation?
Absolutely. Gretchen, that's the only way they're going to get done. We're going to have a series of bills that we're laying out. We're going to actually have it laid out later this week. Another one, for example, about selling insurance across state lines, more competition. And we're going to frankly challenge both sides. We're going to be able to say to those who say you shouldn't change a word, hey, that's not right. We're going to challenge those who say repeal only. I'm not sure that's going to pass. So let's look at a group that's actually about how do you keep what's good and fix what's wrong. That is actually the way the legislative process is supposed to work.
Well, I am so glad that you explained that to us, because I think a lot of people are interested in knowing whether or not legislation will come to the forefront, and it won't just be the president making changes, but actually members of Congress working together as well. Senator, thank you so much for both of your broad perspective on the Ukraine and on Obamacare. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Gretchen.